Thank you, Luke. Luke looks like he's in the military, right? But on his one side of these are all like church buttons and things, and the other side are all his like Model UN things from school. So I don't know, by the time he graduates, there'll be so much shining stuff coming from Luke, we won't be able to see him. But thank you, Luke. And I want to give a special shout out to Anya Snyder today, who emceed for the first time last week. Let's give her a round of applause. You know, it's not easy to say yes to a request to stand up on the stage and just give a testimony. That's not easy to do, but to take on, to do the emceeing for your first time, that's pretty brave, and I look forward to seeing her develop. We've seen Luke develop, right? And now Luke is developing as a sermon giver. So, it's encouraging to see. And I also want to give a shout out to Mansu in the back, who is, Taka had a meeting for a youth ministry today. They're all gathering together. And so Mansu just said he would do the AV stuff. So let's encourage him, even though he got off a little bit to a rough start there with that first song. Again, that kind of thing can be kind of scary, because if you screw up, everybody sees it. Yeah. Also, did you all welcome Henry last week? Henry stand up. Henry Matthews, many people from Camp Aurora know him. Henry, introduce yourself. Where'd you come from?
New York.
And why are you here?
I'm doing internships about mental health on college campuses.
Mental health on college. How many people here recognize Henry? Raise your hand. Come on, raise your hand high. Not if you live here. If you already met him, no. Basically what I'm trying to say is that everyone who's raising their hands are kids from Camp Aurora, because you can go ahead and sit down. He was a counselor last year. He was your counselor, okay. And I remember when I'm sitting in the craft area, he came in and we started talking, and he was sharing with me that he's studying, kind of mental health, and I thought, well, that's kind of interesting, because he was also a camp counselor, which indicated to me that he had some kind of vertical life. I don't know how much, I don't know how, but some kind of recognition of the role of faith in his life. And so we had a whole conversation about how faith, benefits and sometimes is a deterrent to our mental health. We talked about trauma, all kinds of stuff. And he mentioned, I have going to be doing an internship the coming year. And I said, well, if you get it, come to Boston. And so a few weeks ago, I get this Facebook message. Hi, Aunt Catherine. I don't know if you remember me. I was, and I have an internship, and you mentioned there was space in the Boston church. So here he is. So it's a great addition. Yesterday I spoke with a Russian first gen who recently graduated from UTS, and she may be taking a chaplainship at St. Francis Hospital, which is in Brighton. And so she was asking me about our community and staying here. So I feel like all kinds of wonderful people are coming to Boston. Amen? It's exciting. So before I get into my sermon, I wanted to just have a little bit of show and tell. Okay, wait, do I have this turned on? Turned on? Okay, the pointer works. The changer doesn't work. Okay, she mentioned we were at a Project Phoenix staff retreat. So, for many of you that kind of wonder, why is Catherine always doing Project Phoenix? I can say it, I think, in a sentence, that for me, Project Phoenix is practicing and learning how to live in Canaan versus how to fight in the wilderness. So we're in a different, all of the holy, those, we shout with joy, we rise and sing, let's march. They're all very kind of militaristic songs, right? They're fun to sing, but they're all about fighting and destroying and commands, and the whole language, everything is battle language. But if the war is over and you're living in Canaan, it's a different skill set than fighting, right, on the front line. So I feel like for me, as an older, first gen, that there's a lot I have to learn from our young people. Does this work now? Oh, okay. There we go. So anyway, as a result of the Boston Project Phoenix last year, lots more people joined the staff, and we had a staff meeting. As I was leading Hundoke, I think who's that? Reverend Eversley. Where's Kyan? I can't really see well enough. Where's Kyan? In the blanket, right there. Yes, that's her blanket scarf. And Erica is here somewhere too. I think along the line here. So the four of us went. And, okay. This was the day off. We went on we did a little sightseeing to the Sedona Desert. Arizona is really different than New England. It's really different than New England. But that's, here we are here. And then the next day we went to a different place called Sedona, which is a very well-known, it's a lot of spiritual energy, and all kinds of people go there to, like, with their crystals and a energy vortex and all this kind of stuff. So we went to one of those places. Here's Erica. You see how beautiful this is in the background, these mountains? And then these are all I wanted to get a picture with all the sisters that were there. So we recognize, Erica, and where's Kyan? Did Kyan miss this? I think she wasn't here, but these two sisters, this one and this one, they came all the way from Germany. So that was kind of neat having them there. And then here's Reverend Edgerly talking with David Young. This was just to give you an idea of how beautiful it is. And you can't really see in the light, but this is bright red because there's a lot of what is it? Iron in the ground. So it's the kind of stuff, when you look at you see those calendars of pictures around America, and there's always something from the Southwest. It was so amazing to see it in person. We went a little higher up in the mountains there. And then these like nutty cacti. Do you know cactuses is not a word? Cacti is the word. These things are enormous. And I couldn't get a good picture, but in one area when you look out over the hillside, it'd be like, why are all those telephone poles? Why are there like telephone poles all over the hillside? They're not. They're these cacti. So then, and then finally we went to some of those sort of like it's kind of like a Plymouth plantation, not quite as organized, but it's the Wild West, and they had like a shootout in the street and people getting shot and falling in the sand, and the whole there's that whole sort of saloon vibe, And so we went to one area, and when we got out, Lucia Anderson, who's from Arizona, that's their living room that we were in, she said, ladies, you have to come with me to the bathroom. So we call her Grandma Lucia because she's older. So I kind of thought, well, I guess she's worried about us having, like when you're a parent, go pee before we leave. So we walked into the bathroom, and the ladies' bathroom was completely like painted with these funny pictures. And here's a little more. Oh, sorry. This is, oh, maybe it's not working. Okay, it doesn't work. And that's what we saw. You see, here's the, that's painted on the bathroom door. There's Kyan. So I just thought I'd show this to give you a little different view of Kyan than most of us are used to. So the first thing actually on the Project Phoenix calendar is the Japanese Project Phoenix in March, and we'll be hearing more about that. But it was a really wonderful opportunity, and I was so grateful that our Boston community was well represented with 2 elders and 2 youngers. And so anyway, that's how come I wasn't here last weekend. So the title of my sermon changed between when I wrote the letter and when I wrote my sermon. Originally, preparing for this sermon, I had encountered some Hundoke with Father that was the source of the title that I announced, You Are a Present. But as I was reading, I thought, no, that's next week's message more. So I switched. So today's sermon title is Give to Grow and Grow to Give, AKA Pastor Catherine's tithing sermon. Now, I know that if I had announced that it would be the tithing sermon, that was always my intention, just a different title. If I had announced that, maybe a lot of you would have actually been snowed in today, right? We only got like 4 inches of snow, but if you knew that there was going to be a tithing sermon, maybe, suddenly everybody can't get out of their driveway. But it's an important topic, and I have actually given the sermon about tithing a number of times in the past. When I was the Oregon state leader, I gave it. When I first came here, when Reverend Kim was our leader, I gave the sermon. I think maybe Hiroi-san gave it 2 or 3 or 4 times. It's his favorite topic. But, it's a basic sermon. I have all the material. I kind of know what to say. Definitely Hiroi-san has urged me to do it in the last 3 years, but I didn't do it. So I want to ask, so why did I hold back? Why did I not address this issue? Because actually, as a pastor, this is a very, very central and critical issue. Why would I hold back when I knew tithing is good for our spiritual life? Tithing is a tradition that is rooted in the Old Testament. It's even a command. So tithing is a command in both the Old and the New Testament. 1/10 of the produce of the land, whether grain from the fields or fruit from the trees, belongs to the Lord and must be set apart to him as holy. It's from Leviticus. In Proverbs, honor the Lord with your wealth and with the best part of everything you produce. Jesus said when looking at the scribes and Pharisees, what sorrow awaits you teachers of religious law and you Pharisees, hypocrites? For you are careful to tithe even the tiniest income from your herb gardens, but you ignore the more important aspects of the law, justice, mercy, and faith. You should tithe, yes, but do not neglect the more important things. Today, here Jesus says, you should tithe. This is a whole nother sermon. Okay. But Jesus is saying, you should tithe. Okay, no one's run out of the room yet. Okay, good. The Bible mentions money 800 times. And amongst Jesus' parables, half are about money. Why? Because I think Jesus knew and God knows this is where we get tripped up. All the yes buts come up. But when we are able to release 10%, money doesn't have it sort of loosens its hold on us, and we're able to invite God to be part of our finances. Don't you like that idea of God being a part of your finances? So I knew this, and yet I didn't talk about it. I knew that we tithe to acknowledge that what we have belongs to God. In the Psalms, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it. The world and all its people belong to him. And in Chronicles, but who am I and who are my people that we could give anything to you? Everything we have comes from you, and we give you only what you first gave us. So there's the acknowledgement that our life, the very energy that holds us together, has its roots in God. So obviously things don't belong to us, so we should return things to God. I knew this, and yet I didn't speak about tithing. This is getting a little bit more confrontational here. But when we don't tithe, in a sense, we're stealing from heaven. In the Old Testament, in Haggai, why are you living in luxurious houses while my house lies in ruins? This is what the Lord of heaven's army says. Look at what's happening to you. You have planted much but harvest little. You eat but are not satisfied. You drink but are still thirsty. You put on clothes but cannot keep warm. Your wages disappear as though you were putting them in pockets filled with holes. Saying here that what we have if everything comes from God, then something needs to go back. So by not tithing, you're taking what belongs to God in a sense. I know that's a little bit hard language, but it's good to think about. But still, even knowing this, I didn't talk about tithing. On a more positive note, I knew that tithing should come from a joyful and generous heart. Just admonishments like don't steal from God, you don't tithe out of fear or guilt. Tithing, giving back, should come with a joyful and generous heart. In Corinthians, whatever you give is acceptable if you give it eagerly, and give according to what you have, not what you don't have. Going on, the point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. Each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion for God, for God loves a cheerful giver. You hear that often in the church, when you go to a Pentecostal church, that God loves a cheerful giver. I knew this. I knew how important this is. God knows that we're naturally inclined to be what? Selfish. And we want to keep our money, right? There's only so many things you can do with money. You can keep it, you can spend it, you can save it, you can invest it, and you can donate it. There you go. Yes. God knows that, but yet, by taking this step and kind of giving regardless of our own internal feelings, we enable God to change our hearts. So we can, in the end, give joyfully and give cheerfully. The other thing is, if we just leave it to ourselves and our own minds to give, chances are we'd opt out for a whole lot less than 10%. So that kind of number kind of sets us, it's like an accountability number. So I knew this, have known this, and yet for 3+ years I haven't said a word to you about tithing. I know that we want to give out of our obedience, not just out of abundance. Jesus called his disciples, this is the famous story about the widow's mite, where Jesus is watching the temple and the wealthy people are coming and giving, making a big show about their donation. And a woman, a widow, her husband has died. She has very little money. She comes and gives all that she has. Jesus comments to his disciples, I tell you the truth, this poor widow has given more than all the others who are making contributions. For they give a tiny part of their surplus, but she, poor as she is, has given everything she has to live on. Now, I don't advocate tithing yourself into, poverty. But I think the important thing in this message, in this parable, is that Jesus understood that even though this widow gave a small amount compared to the others, she gave a large amount in percentage. And that she, in her own heart, felt like she couldn't afford to give, but she also couldn't afford not to give. So her heart, her conscience, her love for God is, I have to give. So this is a very extreme example, but I think you can see the heart behind it. Still, I didn't preach about tithing. Tithing shows that we have our priorities in the right order. I knew that. Jesus says in Matthew chapter 6, very famous passage, don't store up treasures here on earth where moths eat and rust destroys them, where thieves break in and steal. Store your treasures in heaven where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. So understanding that, what's that expression? You can't take it with you, right? That things like the money in our possessions and stuff that we spend a lot of time focused on are temporal in nature, not eternal. I understand that we can't let the love of money stand in the way of tithing. In Timothy, those who want to get rich fall into temptation and a trap and into many foolish and harmful desires that plunge people into ruin and destruction. There's nothing unequivocal about that statement. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Some people eager for money have wandered from the faith and pierced themselves with many griefs. You know, if you look at in a world where folks are not, where God is not a priority, and where there's an abundance of wealth, people do all kind of weird stuff with that money. All kinds of things that are damaging to their own spirit and damaging to others. Or people make pursuing money a justification for doing really awful things to other people. You know, we understand what the root of sin is. It's not money, but money is the root of a whole lot of sin. Not the root, but a root, a big root. So I think in one sense, when one dedicates some of one's money to God, it can protect the rest. I understood that obedience to this principle also brings blessing. You will experience all these blessings if you obey the Lord your God in Deuteronomy. And this was probably one of the most famous quotes about tithing. It's from the last book of the Old Testament, in Malachi. Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse, so that there may be food in my house, and test me now in this, says the Lord of hosts. If I will not open for you the windows of heaven and pour out for you a blessing until it overflows. We understand in this regard the principle of man's having a certain portion of responsibility, and then God has his portion of responsibility. And so what's the metric that we use? How much is how much is man's portion of responsibility? Come on, you guys say it louder. 5%. How much is God's? So if you do your 5%, you know, you can say, hey, God, come on, pony up. You have your 95% to do. I did mine, you do yours. Maybe for some of you that sounds like a very disrespectful way to speak to God. I speak to God like that a lot. Come on, God, I'm doing my best down here. Kick in, get it going, get on it. And I think God kind of wakes up and goes, oh yeah, I better, get on it. But I think the principle here is that when we really offer to God, then on that foundation, God wants to increase. It's not a guarantee. But often in many, many Christian churches, they make a challenge to people like, start tithing and see what happens. I don't really ascribe to that. But I do know that in our family, there were many, many, many years, we lived paycheck to paycheck, like barely. And, I come from a wealthy family, to be honest, but I didn't get any support for years and years and years. And there was even one time when my mom called and said, I'm making my will. If I give you money, will you give it all to the Unification Church? I said, no, but I'll tithe. I was honest, right? At that point of 4 siblings, it was 10%, 30, 30, 30. Guess who was the 10%? Maybe, So I never had that guarantee, but it didn't stop me from, following this principle. And then, who's to say? My mother changed her mind over the years of our family's actual attendance and care for her. Who knows? But it could have easily gone a different way. I've thought, wow, what if if all our whole congregation tithed, maybe somebody would win the lottery. Even in Christian churches, only 10 to 25% of people in any particular church, it's supported by 10 to 25%. Something's, kind of not right in that calculation. So True Father's words, for those of you that want to read more, because Father speaks a lot about tithing. You can go to tparents.org, Reverend Moon's words, and you kind of books, publications, and you'll find the first Hunduke books, and you'll scroll down and you'll see The Way of the Spiritual Leader, Part 1. And that's my source material. So I don't, the way that these are identified as to when they're spoken, there's just numbers at the bottom that I'm not really, I think it refers to volumes of Father's speeches and page numbers. So I can't tell you what speech it is, but this is where my readings are coming from. Offering a certain portion of your own income for the maintenance of the church sounds extremely good, but I think it's extremely bad. Should I read that again? That's weird, right? Offering a certain portion of your own income for the maintenance of the church sounds extremely good, but I think that it's extremely bad. Making an offering to God should be the first priority in life, before thinking of your own life. And that offering should be 100%, not just a small portion of your income. Father speaks in absolutes, but nevertheless, this is important here. If your life becomes the first priority and God comes next, it is easy for that to become a habit. If God is placed in the second priority, later he will end up being in last place. By offering a tithe from your material possessions, you can make a condition that you have offered all that you have. Although you do not offer the whole, offering a portion with all of your heart and mind is valuable in that sense. By offering one, the rest of the 9 can be also considered to be holy. The person who tithes will never perish. As days go by, his storage room will be filled with more material possessions and blessings. When you make an offering, do you offer the first one or a leftover? When you make a special offering, did I forget to? Okay, oh, sorry, thank you. When you make a special offering to God, the offering object should be pure. That is how you can build a relationship with God. You should not use leftovers for that purpose. So, I want to go back one. So this is important. If we understand that, we're not in a sense, we're not the owners of our own life. So much of who we are was how we lived, how we grew up. We had no control over it. We were born, all of us were born in countries where we survived infancy. There's many places in the world where many children, they don't even survive infancy. Infant mortality rate's very high. All of us can read, I'm assuming. I think we all can read. So much grace came to us that we didn't do anything for. And so in that sense, we owe our lives to something outside of ourselves. And we would want to be able to return gratitude. And yet, we live in a real world and you got to work. That's more distracting than whatever he's doing. How many people here, and you don't need to raise your hands, but how many people here love their job and find tremendous meaning and value and purpose in their job? You don't need to raise your hand. She's a teacher, of course she does. Okay. How many of you feel like, I really wish I could do more for God, but I have to work? You don't need to raise your hand, just think about that. Or I really wish, even if it's not for God, okay, I really wish I could do something more for other people. I had this conversation with a second gen recently who's very unsatisfied with their job because they feel like it's not serving anything. This person doesn't come to church, okay? Just for context. But they're still sharing with me about a sense of like, I want something greater. So after listening to that and thinking about it, I said, well, you should maybe, if you can't change your job, you need to do that because you need money to work, you should really think about tithing. I mean, not to us, but something. You want to give money to something more than yourself, right? So then that while you're working, even if you're not so happy with what you're doing, you still feel like I can take some percent, a symbol of the percentage of this time that I'm investing, my blood, my sweat, my tears, my time, my energy, day after day after day, and that can sort of translate into an offering of greater meaning. That's the value of tithing. For some of our congregation, they are so disciplined, so sacrificial, that check gets written every week or every month. They don't think about it. It's beautiful. It's a habit. But you have to understand what's the value of it. Why do you do it? Because we have to work. We have to do stuff in the world. And so, but by thinking, okay, I get a salary for X amount. And as Father explained, the 10% is that in the growth stages, up to 10, all that was taken, all that was lost. But by offering 10%, then God sort of claims the rest of the 90%. So, again, these are kind of, the language is funny, and I know if you're like still kind of questioning God's existence, it all sounds a little bit strange. But the idea is that by offering 10, then God can claim the rest of the 90. So as if you're working full-time for God, if you offer with that kind of heart. That's valuable. That's meaningful. That can give your life meaning. We had a conversation in Project Phoenix about fundraising, and Jim Edgerly mentioned about how there's people who they really wish they could do more, live a more public life, but they haven't. But they've made a lot of money. And a way that they feel good about themselves is that they may not be able to do the work, but they can give money to support the work. Right? Remember that, Kyan? He said it really clearly. So then he said, then you got to ask for a lot. You ask so much that people go, you get the swallow, like, what? So Father also said, do you offer the first one or a leftover? So what does that mean for us? In the most absolute sense, it means that you don't do your budget first and then think, okay, what have I got left? Right, Hiroi-san? You get your paycheck and you write the tithe first. I remember when when things were, really down to the wire, I used to always, I'd start to, figure out my weekly budget, and I would always write rent first, and then I would cross it out and I put tithe to remind myself that comes first. Okay. So, Father goes on to say, today, what would you call the way of collecting donations in Christian churches? They circulate bags for the donation. Are they beggars? In the Unification Church, do you receive donations in that fashion? Do you also circulate a bag with a rod like a cooking net? And it says here, parentheses, laughter, brackets, we do. You are supposed to make donations in the donation box placed at the entrance door as an expression of your gratitude. I think maybe I lost that. Oh, okay, I lost that in my page. Okay, as an expression of your gratitude for having received grace from God. That is the way it should be done. Do you understand? Actually, when I was in Oregon, after I read that, we changed and we put a box at the door. So I'm already talking to Luke about looking into having, a box at the door. Because in one sense, what is one of the functions of coming to church on Sunday? Is it just to come to receive? To get inspired? To hang out and have lunch and fellowship? Those are all parts of coming to church, right? But actually, if we look from a different perspective, I've been working at my job all week long. Some of us, work from home. Some of us work 5 days a week. Some of us work 6 days a week. Some of us work 7 days a week. Some of us go to work after church. And that work is God your employer? No, right? But when you take your tithe and you come to church and you offer your tithe, it's your way of saying, Heavenly Parent, here's my effort for you this week. It's not just witnessing, or if you don't, even if you can't do anything of those, outreach, witnessing, all that, you bring your tithe, you offer that. That's why I want to get a box at the doorway. I didn't take this quote, but also in this, Father talks about, is it right if you're there and then your kids go, Mom, Dad, I need money for Sunday school, and you just pull money out of your pocket and you give it to them? He says, no, that's not the right way. Before we come to church, we should take a moment and think about my week. And, some of us tithe once a month, then, some people tithe once a week. But it's that idea of taking that, I'm bringing something to offer to God, to offer back what I have done throughout the week. So I feel like, I realize, wow, it's like you just get in the habit, just whip out, write out the check and stick it in the envelope, and okay, my husband does it. But I realize it should be something that we actually do together. It should be a sacred act. Those who do not want to do it may not do it. Heaven does not want to receive money with no heart in it. The donation that you should offer should be prepared in advance. You are not supposed to take any money out of your pocket in the church. In order to offer a donation, you should carry that money with you for at least 3 days to sanctify it through the separation of good and evil. How can you make a donation that is worth less than lunch money? Does anybody feel judged by some of these words? So I knew all of this, brothers and sisters. I've experienced personally, I got all kinds of personal testimony. I'm sure if you talk to certain members of our congregation, they will also give you personal testimony of the value of tithing and how arguably it's one of the most critical aspects to your spiritual life. Yet I didn't talk about this for 3 years. All these scriptures and words coming to us across decades, centuries, and millennia. With all of those, how come I didn't give a tithing sermon until now? It's for your own good. All right? And I can tell you, Hiroi-san came to me many times. He's in our council meetings, Hiroi-san will bring up, a financial report, and he's got this chart. Don't worry, I can't see anybody's name, so everybody relax right now. Okay, but he has a chart, and it has it kind of looks like the history of restoration chart with the line going up. And then he has like dots, and the dots are like connected to, I don't do this stuff very well, but it's like the higher up the dot and the farther is it away from where the horizontal and the vertical meet, those are people who are giving more, right? So there's only a few dots over there. And then clustered all around the bottom, there's a whole lot of dots, and a whole lot of them underneath the line, which means I think that they gave less this year than they did last year. Something like that. So he's got it. So you can look at it and go, ooh, this doesn't look good, So I saw that, but still I didn't say anything. Because I do feel, even though for each one of us, for me as a member, I had the attitude, and I know this is going to be kind of radical for some folks, especially younger folks. You know, I felt it's my responsibility, it's my sacred responsibility between God and myself to tithe. And if the leader completely misuses the money, that's their problem, not mine. I still tithe. Other donations, no. Other donations I want to see. I told Mrs. Inose, you send me a balance sheet and I'll give to Kodan. You show me what it's going to, how much came in, how much, I'll give. You know, I want to see if I want accountability. Now, of course, in the Boston church, we have for years, Hiroi-san, how many years have we been sending out? 15, 12, 10, over 10 years. We've sent you, it used to be monthly, now it's quarterly. An account of when you donate, where your money goes. So as a member, that's the kind of attitude that I had. But as a leader, my feeling is different. My feeling is, even though I know intellectually, I know spiritually, it's, each one of our sacred responsibility. I feel like I don't have the authority. I don't have, because of all the confusion, discord, ambiguity amongst us, between us and headquarters, between all the stuff around the building, I felt like I cannot ask people for money. I cannot, even though it's for your good, as the leader. So I deeply appreciate those brothers and sisters who have consistently tithed through all this confusion, through all this difficulty. I think many of them really thought, what is Catherine doing? And yet still they gave, and they give. You know who you are. And actually, I don't know exactly who all of you are because I don't look at that from Hiroi-san, but I pretty much know. I don't want to see lists of who gives and who doesn't give. But I feel as of last year, with the conversation opening up with headquarters because of Sunshim Kim coming about the building, because of these are a number of things that I feel contribute to why I feel I can stand in front of you now and give this sermon. So some are small, some are not as, some are very significant. But first is that a way came to have a conversation with headquarters where I felt it was cooperative, not coercive. Reverend Edgerly joined the council, and he brought with him, a kind of standard of excellence, accountability, of knowing how to do stuff, right, George? That kind of helped us to focus. George is our council president, and George has a wonderful heart, but he's not the most organized person. So the first few council meetings, Jim would just go nuts, At the end of the meeting, Jim would apologize to everybody for getting angry and frustrated. But eventually, Jim started helping, I said, well, Jim, why don't you help George make the agenda? So this last council meeting that we had it was such a beautiful experience. We were artistically connected. We got through our agenda. It still took a little bit longer than we wanted, but there was no, fighting or discord, and, so having Jim come in and play an active role in the, the day-to-day goings-on of the church has been very helpful. And I think we saw that in what? The wallpaper is gone, right? For how many years have we been in this no man's land, this limbo of feeling bad about how the church looked. And finally, because of these two, all of these factors, we were finally able to show progress. And I think, but most importantly, I'm seeing more and more of our young adults, not just the ones who come to church regularly, not even just young adults in this community, but young adults who see being able to do something in Boston as a way for them to really express their commitment and their creativity and their sense of community. So as you know, we had that meeting back in December, and there were people who came here, first and second gen, who were not part of our Boston family church. But one committee was formed to really look at finance and development. And the day after the Project Phoenix conference in Arizona, we had a Zoom call, which I joined. And we were going through numbers. And sort of like, if we can do this, if we can do this, if we can do this, we can break even. This is like financially looking at, how to use the building more, especially in terms of like making this space available for, events and whatnot. And Jim was going, well, that's not really a very inspiring thing. If you're looking at a business plan and all you do is like barely break even or something, like that doesn't look very hopeful. And he's, Jim is like the voice of reality. And so it's kind of like we're all sort of, but I said, wait a minute though. I said, you can't just measure by money. The Boston Church it's a mecca. In many ways, it's a place for our second gen from this community. It's kind of a haven. It's a place to come. It's a place to gather. And now it's a place where they're beginning to look at and think of how can we, not just get together socially, but things that we can do in the community. And then there's a brother, Yoshi Shiotsu, who went to WPI. He's from Hawaii, but he went to WPI in Worcester and was a part of the Worcester community for a number of years. And he also is very close with the Casadas up in Gloucester. And I met him, and he's someone that I felt this would be a project he would really be interested in. He works digitally. He's his own boss. He can travel all around the world and make money. Isn't that great? So he's free. He's not tied to a 9-to-5. So he actually now is heading up that committee. And after I spoke, he goes, yes, Aunt Catherine, that's exactly right. I've been all over America. And there's some church communities where the place where the second gen identified and gathered, they sold it. And now the second gen don't have any, some that come consistently to church, yes, but some that aren't, there's still having a place is so significant. So then his mind, he started sharing, and then, he said basically exactly the same thing that I said, but it inspired Jim Edgerly much more than if I had said it when I said it. So I see hope, I see progress, regardless of the end, that we're actually moving forward. So I feel like, kind of now's the time to address this issue. The tithing is a fundamental responsibility. It's not actually but I thought responsibility is the wrong word. It's a privilege. So as I mentioned, even in the Christian world, a large majority of any congregation doesn't tithe. I don't want to know the specifics of our numbers. I don't want to know who gives and who doesn't. When I look at you as brothers and sisters, I don't want to see any kind of dollar signs in my eyes, However, I can tell you, I will start to ask you with a smile. And I'm also, if you talk with Hiroi-san, basically, he is absolute and unequivocal 10%. Right, Dr. Hiroi? Right, Reika? But I think whatever you do a little more. If you haven't hit that marker. If you hit that marker, there's plenty of other requests from the Unification Church to give more. But I'd like to challenge us to try that. We never know how God, our ancestors, the spirit world, angels may work. It may be in small ways, it may be in big ways. I think, maybe if 100% of our, Boston community tithe, maybe then we would win that lottery ticket. So tithing is our 5% of And then, you know, if we do our 5%, what happens if God can kick in his 95? You know, what could we do more as a community? There's something that's, now this is very small, but something that's always bothered me every single Sunday since I came to Boston. It's that frigging styrofoam that we use for meals. Anybody know why I don't like styrofoam? Do you know? Do you know how long it takes styrofoam to break down? Come on, it's second gen, so don't know if you guys know that? It doesn't, right? It doesn't break down. I mean, you know, you have to be kind of living under a rock to know that there's like real problems with plastic and all that kind of stuff in the oceans now. And here we are talking about being, you know, lords of creation and the third blessing and all that, and we use styrofoam. But you know what? Styrofoam is what? Cheap. Styrofoam is cheaper. So if you're Yoko Miranda and you're going to BJ's, she wants to buy styrofoam. I talked to her lately. I said, no matter what, no. But that's a very small thing. Okay? Yesterday I got a telephone call from someone wondering, like, how come we don't, is ACLC on the budget this year? You know? Along that line, our sister Hiroi has visited ministers for years and years. When I first came here, she would come downstairs with her coat and her, you know, purse, and she'd go off and take the tea and take a bus and visit ministers, and it was fine. That was 15 years ago. She was still in her 40s. Can somebody do some math? She was in her late 40s. That means she's in her 60s now. She still wants to visit ministers, but she's got to call someone to drive her. You know, I'd love to be able to say, okay, Hiroko, not all the time, but if you really need to go visit that minister, take an Uber. I'm just trying to give you some, like, you know, right today, the reason why Mansu's back there is that Taka, Erica, and Letitia are meeting about youth ministry all day long. How great it would be if there's like a really big budget for them to be able to do exciting things. How about if we actually had money to give to someone else? The Southern Baptists, through their tithes, support universities, seminaries, and mission work. But how great if we had money that we could give to, you know, we could have a committee that would research some, you know, organization that's right on the Boston Common or something that's doing good, that we want to support them as a way of being more of a, you know, engaging in the community, more of a civic thing. You know, these are, you know, we could support the schools in Africa, Peggy. You know, many things if you've got more money. Just money is freedom. It allows you a certain freedom. So, you know, even I heard Pastor Mika, our district director, is supposed to go to Korea for the festivities. But the regional account's a little bit short. So she's kind of trying to figure out how to get the money together to go to Korea. If we have more tithes here, then we tithe more to our district account. And I want to say, you know, this is, in American law, you can be very specific about your donations. So you can actually, this is not exactly tithing, guys, but anyhow, I started down this road, so I guess you can say, I want this money to go for X and not to go for Y. So I know some brothers and sisters that are not confident about how anyone outside of their local community manages money. And so they specifically say, my tithe has to stay, all of it, in the local community. But I can say, Yoko Miranda manages the district budget, so, and it's all there for you to see if you want. Also, Hiroi-san had mentioned, besides tithing, I don't want to overwhelm you, but he said it's time that we resurrect the building fund. But I'm just going to say it so that he doesn't get on me that I didn't say it. You know, tithing is an investment. It shows your investment. It shows what's your priority. And I'm addressing the young people here now. And, you know, you pass it on. But the fact is, the old folks in this congregation have about 10 more years to them. Most of us here, maybe not Irina, she's probably under 60, but I think most of us are 60 years or older. The very people who are, Peggy's 70, the very people who are supporting the Boston community, whether we're in this building or some other place, are not going to be around in 20 years. At least financially, probably not around. And this is true for every unificationist community. So if your community is a priority to you, if it's important to you, it's important to start thinking about being responsible, even if you don't have much. You just, like what Father said, I think the most important thing that I read from what Father said was here. Making an offering to God should be your first priority in life before thinking of your own life. And that offering should be, okay, 100%. That's theoretically, not just a small portion. Nevertheless, if your life, okay, your finances, your priorities becomes the first priority and God comes next, it's easy for that to become a habit. If God is placed in the second priority, later he will end up where? Last. They'll just keep dropping. Because as young people, your life is only going to get more complicated. It's only going to get more complicated. You're single now, okay, you're single now, you're in college, you have a part-time job, your money's tight. You get blessed, you're together, you've got college loans. Money's tight. You're blessed, you got college loans, you have a child. Money's tight. You have a second child. Money's tight. If you don't have that habit of going, okay, I give, the first line in my budget is tithe, donation, then it will just go down, 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 down. Kind of guaranteed. So I'm not trying to say this as a way of like threat. This is not a threat, but it's also a little bit of a like wake up and think about, do you want your community to be a part of your children's life in the future? Because if you do, you need to really think about, about making God a priority. I hope that didn't come across too hard, but just hard enough. You can tell me afterwards. So I didn't give, as I said, I didn't give this tithing sermon for a long time because I felt like I had not done my responsibility. I couldn't in all, I couldn't in good conscience ask you to invest in something that was so nebulous and so unsure. But I feel really differently now. So as I said, watch out. I will be coming. And I'll give you a little bit of a push. Just a little bit, because I know the actual situation of many of our congregants, and I don't want anybody to move from a point of guilt or intimidation. Yeah, guilt or intimidation. And I can be a little bit intimidating, so I'll be careful in that. But at the same time, I want a little bit of a challenge. Because you don't grow unless you're challenged. Does anybody here ever do a sport? Did you guys know that Luke fences? I didn't know that. But has anybody played a sport here? Okay, Chooch, you dance, right? When you dance with people who are better than you, does that help you to improve? So it gives you a little oomph, right? Like, man, I got to up my game, right? And you get better. So the point is, a little push from tithing will help. It's not just to get money from brothers and sisters. You'll find your spiritual life. I won't say your spiritual life will get easier, because I don't think it ever gets easier. I mean, there's always challenges, right, Fukiko-san? Right, Andre? Always challenges. You never know. Challenges come that you don't see coming. But, you know, having that tradition, having that foundation, it gives you a kind of, I don't know what the word is. It just gives you more substance, more confidence, more something. And that's to our own benefit. So there, I've given the tithing sermon, Hiroi-san. And I won't say, can you do it? No. That's the male form of leadership. Okay, so I spoke kind of long, but I was going to end too early for the kitchen, so I kept going. So please join me in prayer. Heavenly Parent, we are beginning the last week of our year, our liturgical year, our religious year. It's a time where we can kind of take stock of ourselves, kind of look at, always the new year is a big goal-setting time. It's a big pledging time. But it's wonderful to have a kind of opportunity to reflect and to kind of look at ourselves and evaluate ourselves and see what we want to improve, whether it be in the way that we relate to each other, in our own like personal spiritual disciplines or physical disciplines. Evaluation and then challenging ourselves is it's a great thing. And we are so grateful, Heavenly Parent, that we have a life to live, that we have health, that we have strength, that we have food to eat, a roof over our heads, that we have people who love us and care about us, that we have hospitals to go to when we're sick and schools to go to for learning, and so much opportunity that we have living where we live. We're grateful that we know of your existence. We know that life is not just this physical world, that there is a life of spirit, there's a life of an internal life, an internal world, and that things can move in ways that we would never understand, never imagine if we just think externally. So I'm very grateful that on this last Sunday of the year, Heavenly Parent, I could speak to this issue. The title of my sermon was Give to Grow and Grow to Give. So I hope in many ways that can become like for each of us, that we can find ways to give that will facilitate our growth. And as we grow, then we can give in other ways as well. So I pray that as this week now, next time we get together will be for our Heavenly Parents' Day pledge service at 7 in the morning on Saturday. And then we'll have our wonderful celebration with brothers and sisters all around Massachusetts on Sunday. That we are able to feel a kind of a sense of renewal and a sense of new beginning, and be able to make great strides, or not great strides, but just strides, or maybe just steps forward in this new coming year of 2020. I thank you, Heavenly Parent, and I offer this report in the name of the Ono family of Blessed Central Family. Adieu.